1762-18-B, State Senator Raul Lopez for continuance of the punishment hearing.
The state is Maggie Hinojosa and Juan Bazan present and ready for this state.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Lieutenant Lewis, Mauricio Martinez. We're ready to proceed. The defendant is present and is receiving the services of the certified interpreter.
So, Mr. Jose, we call your first witness.
Your Honor, before I call the first witness, I would just like for the court to take judicial notice of all these witness testimony from the guilt-innocence phase into this phase, the punishment phase. I also want you to take into consideration all the state's exhibits and defense exhibits that were admitted during the guilt-innocence phase into this punishment phase.
I will.
Just for the record, subject to any rulings and objections previously made.
Subject to the objections that were made by the counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Patricia Pulido.
Ms. Pulido, can you come with you, ma'am? And ma'am, the sworn testimony in this matter shall be the truth, so help you God.
Sí. Yes.
Thank you. Have a seat. And if you feel comfortable, you can remove the mask.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Pulido, would you please state your full name for the record?
Sí, mi nombre es Patricia Pulido.
Yes, my name is Patricia Pulido.
Ms. Pulido, who is your husband?
Mario Alberto Pulido.
Mario Alberto Pulido.
Ms. Pulido, how did you meet your husband?
Mi esposo yo tengo, bueno, de hecho, tengo 26 años de casada, pero ya tenía 2 años anteriormente de conocerlo.
My husband, we have been married for 26 years, and it had been 2 years before when we met each other.
And where did you all meet?
En Reynosa.
In Reynosa.
So you all dated for 2 years before you married him?
Sí, 2 años antes.
Yes, 2 years before.
Do you remember the month and year you married?
Fue en febrero. El mes de febrero, no recuerdo exactamente el día, pero fue en el mes de febrero.
It was on February. I do not remember the exact day, but it was in the month of February.
And the year?
El año, pues, ese es, que son 26, fue como en el 90, como en el 90 más o menos, 89, 90.
What is it, 26? It was around 90, around the 90s, more or less.
Okay. And did you marry him in Reynosa?
Sí, nos casamos en Reynosa.
Yes, we got married in Reynosa.
Ma'am, did you eventually come to live to Texas?
Sí, yo tengo ya 32 años de vivir aquí en Estados Unidos.
Yes, I have been living in the United States for 32 years now.
When did you and your husband move to Texas?
De hecho, después de que nos casamos en el 91, nos vinimos para acá.
Actually, after we got married on the 91, and after that we came over here.
And where did you live when you came here to Texas?
Vivimos con una hermana. Al principio fue más o menos como 1 año y medio, y ya después vivimos en McAllen por la 29.
We lived with a sister at the beginning for around a year and a half, and then afterwards we lived in McAllen on 29th.
Okay. And when did you have your first child?
A mi hija la tuvo en el 91.
I had my daughter in 91.
And what is her name?
Isla Pulido.
Isla Pulido.
And did you have another child after her?
Sí, después de que tuve a Isla, a los 5 años tuve a Mario Alberto.
Yes, after I had Isla, after 5 years I had Mario Alberto.
And after that, did you have another child?
Sí, después de 5 años tuve a Yacho.
Yes, after 5 years I had Yacha?
Yacho Pulido, sí.
Joshua Pulido.
Joshua Pulido? Okay. And did you have a fourth child?
Sí, a los 2 años y medio tuve a Cristal Pulido.
Yes, after 2 years and a half, I had Crystal Pulido.
Okay, and these are all the children that you've had with Mr. Pulido?
Sí, 4.
Yes, 4.
Can you tell the jury what kind of a husband Mr. Pulido was?
Mi esposo era una persona muy tranquila
My husband was a very tranquil person.
y pues muy trabajador, muy responsable.
He was a hard worker and very responsible.
Y pues la verdad él nunca tuvo problemas con nadie porque él era muy tranquilo, él estaba muy dedicado a la familia.
And to be honest, he never had problems with anybody because he was very tranquil. He was always dedicated to his family.
What kind of jobs did your husband do?
Mi esposo trabajó primero 5 años en la tienda del Globo, en McAllen.
My husband worked first for 5 years at the El Globo store in McAllen.
Después trabajó 2 años en la Levi's.
And then he worked 2 years at the Levi's.
Y después de ahí trabajó en la compañía de Naples Drilling, que es una compañía del aceite.
And after that, he worked in a company labeled Dream, which is an oil company.
I'm sorry, I think it's Neighbor Drilling?
Nabor Drilling, Nabor, es Nabor, sí.
Neighbor Drilling.
And how many years did he work with Neighbor Drilling?
¿Y por cuántos años trabajó?
Ahí trabajó por 19 años.
He worked there for 19 years.
And after that, what other job did he do?
Pues él era de las personas, bueno, primero empezó, ¿verdad?, a trabajar de piso y ya después de ahí se fue se subían las torres, pues le dicen, no sé, ¿verdad?, qué tipo, cómo le dicen, que se suben arriba en la torre, no sé, como changos, algo así les dicen, no sé exactamente pues, la palabra, pero él trabajó en esa compañía, 19 años.
He worked first, I don't know, he was the kind of person who worked on the ground, and after that he would climb the towers. I do not know what type of word they use for that. I think they use the word monkeys, that is a word. He worked in that company for 19 years.
Okay. And when he quit working with Neighbor Drilling, what was the next job that he did?
Después de trabajar en el aceite, bueno, de hecho, pues estuvo por 19 años, ya después se fue a la compañía de la tienda de H&B.
After working with the oil company, he was there for 19 years. After that, he went to work for the company H&B.
And how many years did he work with H&B?
Ahí trabajó casi como cerca de todo, después como casi 3 años, 2 años y medio, algo así, no recuerdo.
Almost, he worked almost for 2 years, almost 3 years, 2 years and a half, I do not remember.
And ma'am, did you ever have a job when you were here in Texas?
No, yo nunca trabajé.
No, I never worked.
So you were a stay-at-home mom with your children?
Exacto, siempre me dediqué a mis hijos y a mi esposo, a mi familia.
Exactly, I always dedicated myself to my children, my husband, and my family.
So Mario Pulido was your sole support?
Sí, él fue el único apoyo para nosotros.
Yes, he was the only support for us.
Ma'am, on November the 28th of 2016, how many of your children were still living at home with you?
Estaban 3 conmigo.
There were 3 with me.
That would be the 3 youngest ones, Mario, Alberto, Joshua, and Crystal?
Sí.
Yes.
And how was Mario Pulido as a father?
Pues él, como le digo, él fue pues un hombre muy responsable, muy dedicado a sus hijos y fue muy buen esposo.
Like I tell you, he was a very responsible man. He was dedicated to his children, and he was a very good husband.
Ma'am, on November 28th of 2016, when your husband was murdered by this defendant, Raul Lopez, how did that impact your family or your life?
Pues nos cambió la vida a todos.
It changed all our lives.
Can you tell the judge how it has changed your life from that point?
Pues de hecho, ¿verdad? Pues como él era el apoyo, ¿verdad? Para nosotros siempre fue, ¿verdad? Pues una persona muy responsable y pues de hecho pues sí, todo nos cambió la vida completamente al no tenerlo con nosotros, ¿verdad? Porque pues mis hijos, ¿verdad? Han sufrido, o sea, muchas ausencias de ellos, sobre todo mi hija que cumplió sus 15 años y no tenerlo, o sea, para nosotros ha sido todo muy duro.
Un momento.
Okay. Please. Well, like I was telling you, he was a support for us. He was very responsible. Like I said, it changed our lives to not have him with us. My children have suffered, especially my daughter. She's 15 years old.
Ma'am, did you have to get a job after because you didn't have your husband, or how have you been supporting yourself?
Sí, me dedico a negocio, o sea, por mi cuenta.
Yes, I have a business on my own.
And how has it affected your younger children not to have them home?
¿Perdón?
Pardon me?
How has your husband's death affected your children, him not being home?
Pues mucho les ha afectado a mis hijos, a todos, pues a todos nosotros y como le digo a la familia.
It has affected my children a lot, and like I was telling you, the whole family.
Ma'am, you know that we're here because this is the sentencing phase of the case against Raul Lopez, is that correct?
Así es.
That is correct.
And what would you like the judge to sentence Raul Lopez?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance of the basic province of the sentencer that's been impacted.
Your response?
No, it's, I think it's her right to let the court know what kind of sentence she would like to have this defendant have.
But again, Judge, that's an indelible influence on the finder of fact, which is this court. It is not this witness's province to decide what is a just sentence. It is this court's province.
State the objection.
Ms. Pulido, would you like to let the court know anything about how you feel about this sentencing phase without having to say a number?
O sea, pues yo pido más que nada, ¿verdad? De por vida, porque
Objection, Your Honor. Once again, same objection.
Okay, they're not, you can't say how much time you want him to get, but what would you want? What kind of justice would you want?
Objection, Your Honor. It calls for the same response. And while I recognize that the record may not reflect the translation prior to the court's ruling, I'm well aware of this court's ability to speak the Spanish language, and I am afraid that if this woman is allowed to answer this question, it will once again have an indelible impact on this court's sentence.
State the objection.
Your Honor, I'll rephrase. Ms. Pulido, is there anything that you would like for this court to consider in the punishment of Raul Lopez?
Pues lo justo nada más, pido lo justo, ¿verdad? Porque por lo que hizo.
What's fair only? I ask for what is fair for what he did.
I pass the witness.
Mr. Raul.
Yes, sir, thank you. afternoon.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Pulido, I want to remind you that although I'm asking questions in English and you are being allowed to respond in Spanish, I would ask you to give your responses in short sentences so that we can have the interpreter be able to keep up with your testimony.
Está bien.
Okay,
It's okay.
Ms. Pulido, before I go any further, you and I have not had an opportunity to visit, correct?
No.
No.
However, over the course of this trial, before the jury came back with their verdict, I made it a point to say hello and good morning and good afternoon to you. Is that right?
Sí.
Yes.
Did I in any way, ma'am, disrespect you or offend you by doing so?
No.
No.
You recognized then, and surely by now, that I had a job to do in defending the rights of Mr. Lopez, correct?
Sí. Así
Yes.
es.
That is correct.
And do you agree with me that in this country, we are all entitled to a proper defense?
Sí.
Yes.
A defense which can be important in pointing out certain things about a case or a person who is associated with that case. Do you agree?
A ver, perdón, no le entendí bien. A ver.
Pardon, I did not understand very well.
Let me rephrase that. You were actually given an exception to one of the rules and were allowed to sit in the courtroom during the trial, correct?
Así es.
That is correct.
And so you had an opportunity to hear not only the questions and answers from the government,
The state.
Así es.
but you also had the
That is
opportunity to hear, the questions and answers that were asked of you from the defense.
Así es.
That is correct.
And so you would agree, Ms. Pulido, that during that experience, you recognized, depending on who the witness was, that there are different ways of looking at what happened.
Your Honor, I object this to relevance. I don't know what he's getting at.
Judge, if she could let me ask my next question, she'll have every idea. Do you agree?
Sí.
Yes.
So, have you ever met Mr. Raul Lopez?
No, nunca.
No, never.
And so before this trial started, the only thing that you knew was that he had been accused of a crime.
Claro.
Of course, yes.
But again, over the course of this trial, you learned a lot about Mr. Lopez. Isn't that right?
Así es.
That is correct.
And some of the things that you learned about Mr. Lopez came from people related to Mr. Lopez. Right?
Sí.
Yes.
And some of the things that you learned about Mr. Lopez, in fact, came from professionals, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, correct?
Así es.
That is correct.
And Ms. Pulido, would you agree with me that the testimony that we heard from those people showed you not only a different Raul Lopez than you expected to see and hear in this courtroom?
Your Honor, I object this to speculation.
Let's look at the question.
But you also learned he was sick, right?
Pues oí que estaba enfermo, más no sé yo.
Well, I heard that he was sick, but I do not know.
Okay. Well, you heard the testimony from Dr. Gregorio Pina. Do you remember that?
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
Sí.
Okay.
Yes.
No disrespect, ma'am, but the young lady seated in front of you has to hear words. She can't hear or head nods, okay? Okay?
Ah, okay.
That's okay.
So when Dr. Pina took the witness stand, he told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and you were able to hear, that Mr. Lopez,
Your Honor, once again, the state is going to object as to relevance. We're not here to talk about insanity anymore. This is a sentencing phase, and it doesn't matter what this witness felt that this defendant, whether he had an illness or not. That's already been litigated. The jury already made their decision.
Your Honor, may I have the court reporter read back the last question? I'm sorry.
I need a second. Okay, question. So when Dr. Pena took the witness stand, he told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and you were able to hear that Mr. Lopez,
Thank you. Let me know when you're ready.
go ahead.
Ms. Pulido, that Mr. Lopez in fact had a history of mental illness in his family.
Sí, sí lo escuché.
Yes, I heard.
And Dr. Pena also talked to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and once again, since you were in the courtroom, you were able to hear that Mr. Lopez suffered from hallucinations,
Así es.
That is correct.
and that he suffered from an illness called schizophrenia.
Sí lo escuché.
Yes, I heard that.
And again, these are things that you did not know about him before the trial started.
No.
No.
So, what I meant earlier when I asked you that we are all entitled to a defense, you would agree that it's important for those things to be brought to light, wouldn't you?
Es su trabajo hacerlo.
Okay,
It is your job to do it.
sure. But Ms. Hinojosa asked you a few minutes ago that you said, when asked, what are you asking this court? And you said that you want justice and that you want what's fair.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Así es.
That is correct.
So we know that the incident or the shooting that occurred on November the
28.
28th of 2016, excuse me. We know that that was not a robbery, correct?
¿Perdón, ¿no era qué?
The shooting that your husband suffered as a victim was not a robbery, correct?
No, no fue robo, fue un asesino. O sea, fue, en momento no fue un robo, no fue por robo.
Okay.
No, it wasn't a robbery.
Wasn't a drug deal gone bad, right? Right?
Es que no lo escucho bien, lo escucho bien, es que está muy despacio su voz.
So just, can we have it, maybe they can adjust whatever. it
Ya lo
is.
tengo, el volumen sí lo tengo, sí está alto, pero lo escucho muy su voz, muy despacio. Sí, por favor.
We know that it was not a drug deal gone bad. We know that it was not a robbery. We know that it was not a home invasion. Correct?
No.
No.
And there was no evidence to suggest that Mr. Lopez was a member of a gang.
No, yo no sé.
No, I do not know.
In fact, there was no evidence to suggest that Mr. Lopez had any problems, disagreements, or arguments with your husband. Isn't that right?
No, yo no sabía nada de esto.
No, I did not know anything about that.
And over the course of your trial, of this trial, excuse me, we didn't hear any of that evidence either. Right? In fact, Ms. Pulido, the very reality of this trial is we still don't know why he did it, do we?
No, pues él sabe por qué lo hizo.
No, well, he knows why he did it.
Right. But again, my question to you is, after listening to the doctors who testified, after listening to fellow co-workers at HEB, whether victims of the shooting or merely present at the scene, after hearing all of that, there's still no explanation for his behavior that night. Correct?
A ver, no otra vez, dígame otra vez porque no. A ver, dígame más despacio porque no.
Yeah.
Again, please tell me again. Tell me again slowly, please.
Okay, let me break it down. You were here in the courtroom when several of Mr. Lopez's co-workers from HEB came in to testify, correct?
Sí.
In
Yes,
fact, this court, as a courtesy to you, provided you with the same apparatus that you are utilizing now in order to understand the proceedings during the trial.
Así es.
yes,
So, even though the proceedings were occurring in English, you had the benefit of the interpretation throughout.
Así es.
that is correct.
So, when we heard from Mr. Lopez's co-workers, the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and you who were present and able to hear, came to understand that Raul Lopez was a co-worker, a friend, correct?
Así es.
That is correct.
In fact, we even heard from Froilan Garza, one of the co-workers who suffered a gunshot wound that night. We learned from him, and you were able to hear, I expect, that not only were they good friends, but that Froilan had a habit of cleaning the lunch table so that Raul Lopez could sit next to him.
Así es.
That is correct.
So again, I ask you, after listening to the co-workers, there wasn't any evidence of a reason or a motive for him to have done this shooting, right?
No sé qué fue lo que pasó, yo no sé nada de eso, o sea, él debe de saber lo que hizo, o sea,
I do not know.
Nothing about that. He should know what he did.
Next, we heard from various professionals in the area of psychology and psychiatry, right?
Así es.
That is correct.
We even heard from a doctor at the county jail.
Así es.
That is correct.
And we began to understand through her testimony that as early as a month or 2 months after arrest, Mr. Lopez had shown signs of hallucinations or psychosis. Do you remember hearing that testimony?
Sí, sí lo escuché.
Yes, I heard it.
And the doctor, the same doctor from the county jail, educated the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that what she meant by psychosis was a difference of reality. Do you remember that?
Así es.
That is correct.
We then heard from Dr. Gregorio Piña, and Dr. Piña also recognized that Mr. Lopez was not only continuing to hallucinate, but they had a history of hallucinating. Do you remember him testifying to that?
Sí lo escuché.
Yes, I heard it. Yes.
And we learned from the same Dr. Pina that as part of his evaluation, he investigated Mr. Lopez's family history.
Así es.
That is correct.
And Dr. Pina, after having done that investigation, reached a conclusion that indeed there was mental illness in Mr. Lopez's family. Is that right?
Sí, sí lo escuché.
Yes, I heard.
And that became even more important, would you agree, when we heard from Dr. Tomas Gonzalez. Do you remember Dr. Tomas Gonzalez, the bald-headed doctor who came to testify?
Así es.
That is correct.
Now, speaking of Dr. Gonzalez, you know, because you heard, that he was appointed by this court, right?
Así es.
That is correct.
In other words, I didn't pay him any money. And he didn't have any motivation, as far as I know, to testify one way or the other, right?
Así es.
That is correct.
And we know that he's not related to Mr. Lopez, right?
Así es.
That is correct.
And so, in his 30-some odd years of experience in the area of forensic psychiatry, he not only confirmed what the doctor at the county jail said, he not only confirmed what Dr. Pina said, but he went further to educate all of us about the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. Do you remember that?
Sí lo escuché.
Yes, I heard.
And some of those symptoms included hallucinations, a break from reality, insomnia, all of the different things that would contribute to someone who acted or behaved in a way that didn't make sense. Right?
Sí lo escuché todo eso.
Yes, I heard all that.
After listening to the doctor from the county jail and Dr. Pina, Dr. Gonzalez, we still don't know why Mr. Lopez did what he did on November the 8th, 28th, do we?
Que él no sabe lo que hizo, dice. Okay.
Are you saying that he doesn't know what he did? Pardon me?
What I'm asking you is, after having listened to the testimony of the doctors, the testimony of the doctors did not shed any light on why Raul Lopez shot into that window at the HEB on November the 28th of 2016. Correct?
Todo está entendido, todo lo escuché, todo eso.
Everything is understood. I heard all that.
Okay, but with all due respect, do you agree with me?
¿De acuerdo en lo que todo se dijo?
Yes, ma'am.
In agreement with what was
Así
said?
es.
Sí,
Así
señora.
es.
That is correct.
In the testimony that we heard during the trial, ma'am, we heard that Mr. Raul Lopez was a hard worker. Do you remember that?
Sí, sí lo escuché.
Yes, I heard.
In fact, let's not forget about the testimony we heard that on the very night of the shooting, he had been praised in front of some new employees and set as an example. You remember that?
Sí, sí lo escuché.
Yes, I heard.
We also heard that Mr. Lopez was a good husband. Do you remember when his now ex-wife came to testify?
Sí, sí me acuerdo.
Yes, I remember.
And she testified that he was always either working or at home.
Sí, sí lo escuché.
Yes, I heard.
We heard from her also how much his children meant to him. Right?
Claro, como todo, como todos padres, ¿verdad?
Of course, like every parent.
Sure. And a few minutes ago, when you testified about your husband, you said he was a hard worker. You said that he was dedicated to his family and that he was a good husband. Right?
Así es.
That is correct.
You just agreed with me that that's what the evidence in this case showed about Mr. Lopez. Right?
Sí, todo lo escuché, todo lo que dijeron, todo lo que han dicho de él, yo lo he escuchado todo, o sea.
Yes, I heard everything what was said about him. I heard everything.
And so again, Ms. Pulido, still no explanation.
Disculpe, ¿explicación de qué?
Pardon me, explanation about what?
Your Honor,
His behavior that night.
Your Honor, I object. I've let defense counsel go on and on about this. He knows
Objection, Your Honor, with a speaking objection. If she has a legal objection, I'd like to hear it.
irrelevance, Your Honor. I think that he knows that the
Objection to
state
the
doesn't
speaking
have to prove
objection.
motive. The state does not have to prove motive. We just have to prove that he did it. And he keeps asking her, what is the motive?
Objection to the speaking
The state
objection.
does not have to prove motive. That's my objection.
So, Ms. Pulido, if I recall correctly, my last question was, the same qualities that you used to describe your husband, Mr. Pulido, may he rest in peace, are the same qualities that we heard about Mr. Lopez during this trial. Right?
Todo ya lo que usted dice, todo ya lo había escuchado. Me está haciendo...
What you're saying, I heard it before.
Okay. And so again, or once again, we are left with no explanation why Mr. Lopez, a good husband, a hard worker, a man dedicated to his family, behaved in the way that he did on November the 28th of 2016. Right?
Sí, sí lo he escuchado todo, pero aún así no...
Objection, non-responsive? As we can have.
Yes, I heard everything.
You may finish your answer.
Go ahead.
Sí, usted me está haciendo preguntas que entonces ya las sabían. O sea, no sé qué me quiere decir con todo eso. O sea, ya lo entendí todo. O sea, ya me lo había dicho usted. O sea,
You are asking me questions about, I heard all that already. I do not understand what you're asking me.
Okay, that's fair. Let me tell you why. When you told this judge that you want justice and that you want what's fair,
así es.
That is correct.
you would agree that the court should take into consideration all of the things that you and I are discussing now. Wouldn't you?
Sí, pues lo mismo. O sea, es lo mismo que estamos hablando. O sea,
Yes, it's the same. It is the same thing that we are talking about.
Ms. Pulido, are you familiar with Matthew in the New Testament of the Bible? Where he talks about an eye for an eye?
así es.
That is correct?
Have you heard that before?
Sí.
Yes.
Would you agree that an eye for an eye is that principle of justice that requires punishment to equal the crime?
Yo nomás pido justicia. Yo no estoy pidiendo más otra cosa. Yo no pido muerte, no pido nada. Simplemente nomás que pague lo que él hizo. Es todo lo que pido.
I am only asking for justice. I am not asking for death or anything else. I am just asking for him to pay for what he did.
Okay. Now, Ms. Pulido, over the course of this trial, a number of times, and especially during closing argument, surely you remember me telling the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that I admitted Mr. Lopez committed this crime. Do you remember that?
Sí.
Yes.
We still don't know why, do we?
La verdad no sé, nomás saber por qué lo hizo. Es como
To
le-
be honest, I do not know. Only he knows why he did it.
Thank you, Ms. Pulido, for being here. Past witness.
Just a couple more questions.
Go ahead.
Sí.
Ms. Pulido, had your husband, Mario Pulido, ever mentioned Raul Lopez to you before this incident happened?
Que si él me mencionó antes,
If he mentioned him before? Sí.
pues nada más que trabajaba en la tienda y que era un poquito agresivo, que se ponía agresivo.
Only that he worked at the store and he was a little aggressive, that he would be aggressive.
And isn't it correct to state that
Objection to leading.
Oh, let her finish the question. That's sound good.
your husband, he never went and shot his coworkers, is that correct?
Así es.
That is correct.
That's the big difference between your husband, Mario Pulido, and this defendant, Raul Lopez, is that correct?
Así es.
That is correct.
And it's your understanding, because we spoke,
Objection to leading.
Oh, let's see what the question is.
Go ahead.
that in order for him to claim the insanity defense, I explained to you that he had...
Objection, leading and counsel testifying.
So moved.
that the defendant, Raul Lopez, he had to admit that he committed this crime, is that correct?
Así es.
That is correct.
And you sat here during the testimony and you heard the 911 call from Raul Lopez, is that correct?
Sí.
Yes. You heard Raul Lopez in that call.
Objection to the continuing leading of the witness.
Sustained.
What did you hear in that 911 call? Do you remember?
Que si yo escuché la llamada del 911,
If I heard the 911 call,
Right, of Mr. Raul Lopez.
no.
no.
You don't remember when you were here in the courtroom?
Sí.
Yes.
Do you remember that he called 911 and said that he committed that shooting at the HEB?
Así es.
That is correct.
And as defense counsel said, we're not here for a robbery. We're not here for a home invasion or for a drug deal. We are here for the mass shooting that Raul Lopez committed on November 28th of 2016. Do you understand that?
Así es.
That is correct.
And in that mass shooting, how many times did your husband get shot at? Do you know?
Creo que fueron, pues fueron varios disparos, no recuerdo exactamente.
I believe there were several shots. I do not remember exactly.
9 times your husband got shot at. 9
Objection
times.
to counsel testifying.
Sustained.
Judge, perhaps counsel needs to be admonished. I hate to continue interrupting the proceedings.
So moved. Don't lead them, please.
Has Raul Lopez ever told you that he was sorry for what he did?
Hasta ahorita no.
As of today, no.
Have you ever seen him be remorseful that he committed the shooting?
Pues no, no lo veo arrepentido.
No, I do not see him remorseful.
Do you remember whether he sounded remorseful on the 911 call?
No.
No.
I'm passing the witness.
Very briefly, Your Honor, court indulge.
Sure.
Ms. Pulido,
Mande.
you were asked about the difference between Mr. Lopez and your husband. Do you remember that?
¿Qué
Yes,
se
no.
le di? No lo escucho.
I can hear you.
Ms. Hinojosa asked you whether your husband committed a shooting. And then she asked you, isn't that the difference between your husband and Mr. Lopez? And you agreed. Do you remember that?
No.
Well, let me ask you this, Ms. Pulido. Do you have any history of mental illness in your family?
Objection is
No,
not
ninguna.
Mr. Honor.
No, none.
Es que no escucho bien esto. Se va los nubes.
Your Honor, may I change?
Sure. This one.
History of mental illness in your husband's family, correct?
No.
No,
Your husband did not suffer from hallucinations, breaks from reality, or paranoid schizophrenia, correct?
No.
no,
And he was never diagnosed with any sort of mental illness or debilitating condition mentally.
No.
no.
Isn't that the real difference between your husband and Mr. Lopez?
Pues sí, pero mi esposo no tiene ningún problema.
Well, yes, my husband did not have any problem.
No more questions.
Just one quick question. Ms. Pulido, at the end of the day, is it correct that you suffered a great loss because of what this defendant did that night on November the 28th of 2016?
Así es.
That is correct.
And nothing's going to bring him back, is that correct?
No, ya no.
No, not anymore.
So at the end of the day, you want what's just for you and your family, is that correct?
Así es.
That is correct.
That's us what we ask.
Support?
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Let me step down. Thank you very much.
Ms. Pulido, could you state your full name for the record?
Yes, my name is Isla Itzel Pulido. I now go by Garza, but Garza or Pulido is fine.
And how do you spell your middle name itself for the court reporter?
Itzel is Itzel.
Okay. Ms. Pulido, how are you related to Mario Pulido?
I am his daughter.
And can you tell us a little bit about your father, Mario Pulido?
Where to begin? My father, as any daughter would say, but I loved my dad. My dad, since I'm very young, taught us to be responsible. He's a very family man. We were very united. We try to keep the same morals that he taught us to this day. Growing up, my dad always put his family first. He always worked to the max. He wasn't too much at home because he would try to work as much as he can to provide a better living for us. My parents came from Mexico when my mom was pregnant, and since then, growing up, I'm the oldest one. So since I've been little, he always has put for us to prioritize school and to prioritize a better living that he wished he had.
Isa, were you since you were the firstborn, were you like a daddy's girl?
Yes, it was. I still consider myself a daddy's girl. Yes, I am.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you married?
Yes, I am married.
Who's your husband?
My husband, his name is Jesus Garza, and we've been married for 5 years, but we've been dating since more than 12 years. So he as well had the privilege of knowing my dad. We have two wonderful kids together, a boy and a girl. My daughter, the oldest one, she is 7, and she was a year and a half. She's the only grandchild that had the privilege of meeting her grandpa.
And how old is your little boy?
My little boy is 2 years old.
2 years old. Did your dad give you away at your wedding? Did you have a big wedding?
I was engaged when my dad passed away.
Oh, okay.
So we were planning a wedding, and due to the circumstances, we didn't have it upon us to go through it. So we got married, but we just did something small. That was as any daughter, that's the best thing that they want to be given away from their dad, and I wasn't gonna have that, so I rather just decided to not do it.
Okay, and when you're talking about because of the circumstances, specifically what circumstances are you talking about?
Because he died instantly.
Because of the incident at HEB?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. And before we get into that, ma'am, tell us a little bit about yourself. What high school did you graduate from? Did you go to college? What are you doing today?
Yes, I graduated from Palmview High School. I went to La Jolla District since growing up. And I graduated from high school. My dad was able to provide. My dad and my mom, both of my parents, provided for me, so I won't work until I graduated from college, and I thankfully did. I am a registered nurse, and I am currently going to school for managed practitioner. God willing, I graduate this year.
That's amazing. So from a registered nurse, are you attending UTRGV?
No, I'm going online to University of Arlington.
Okay. To become a nurse practitioner?
Yes, ma'am.
And you say that the whole time that you were studying to become an RN, your parents paid for that?
I never worked in my life. My dad and my mom helped me, and they provided for me. They told me that my priority was school. If I would go to school, that they would not make me work. So I didn't work, and thankfully my first job was when I became a registered nurse.
Okay. And so are you working at this moment, or are you just going to?
Yes, I am.
Where are you working?
I work with Rio Grande Regional. I'm in the emergency department. I'm an ER nurse.
Now, ma'am, you understand that we're here because of the sentencing phase, because of your dad's murder. How has not having your dad affected your life in general?
It has completely changed my mind into so many ways that I can't even describe. The words can't even describe. It shifted all our family to different ways. My dad was a very humble man that we never, unfortunately, but now we see how much he really affected, how much he did for our family, and how much he was our glue for the family. And without him, we had to, with our pain, get to, together, form. We were broken into pieces, and our pain, and with God's help, little by little, to this day, we trying to glue the pieces together, so we can form and be strong, as I know that my dad would have wanted us to.
And have you had to take more of a caring role with your mom, Patricia Pulido?
Yes, I have. when everything happened, of course, we don't know how we each as a person were going to, the impact, how it was going to just change and react. That's the word that I'm looking for, how we were going to react. And I am the oldest, so of course I was the one that actually got the news from my husband. He called me through the phone to tell me that there was an incident, and my mom herself has gone through a lot of trauma. Even before my dad, she has lost her mom and her siblings. So at that moment, I knew my mom wasn't gonna be mentally, physically, emotionally okay. So I put my own emotions aside, and I knew that if I wasn't gonna be strong, no one else would be. So I was able to, as much as I could, give my mom, be there for her. And so much was going around that, all those days were just a blur for us, so I have to now, me and my husband, provide that responsibility that we get, from my dad, and I promised my dad in his coffin that I was gonna, put everything that he told us to be, how he raised us, and that's how we are doing with the little ones, with my little brothers. And I hope that we're doing the right thing, but we're trying. And my mom too, she's tried to be very strong, and I give her the most respect because I don't know how she went through.
Right, and so you have, since this incident happened from 2016 to now, April, well, since the trial started, how did you all deal with all that waiting period of, when the case went to trial? Did that cause any more trauma for your family, the waiting?
It did a lot, and we never nobody knows what they're going through until we going through this whole process. But it was, we've been waiting, for so long for this day to come, so we can provide, so we can ourselves get closure, since day one, coming day one for the court here, it's very frustrating, the whole process, but we had to try to remain as calm and as patient as we could. So I know that there was a lot of evidence, there was a lot of people that were affected, not just us, but other people also were very affected. We went through a different judge that had to be assigned, and then we went through, of course, a pandemic that itself closed the courts, so that, with that being said, now it's been 5 years, but like it was just yesterday, but it's been 5 years, we've been counting the days, praying to God, for this day to come, and we're hoping justice is served.
Okay, and ma'am, has the trial itself, how has it affected your mom? Did you see how it has affected her? She sat through the trial, through at least the 2 weeks of trial that we had. How has it affected your mom?
It affects her in a way that I know she's not open about it, but she has insomnia, she has difficulty sleeping, she has anxiety, she has compulsiveness that she has to overthink and think and ask the question at least 4 or 5 times. I know my mom deep in and out, and I know that she doesn't see it, but I do see that it does, and it's always been there since since everything that happened, since the incident that happened. But, now with, we waited for so long, but now that the trial started, she just wants to make sure that she's aware of everything, and she'll call me. She called me maybe 2 weeks ago. I mean, we talk more than once every day, but when we were going through this 2-week trial, called me at 2, 3 in the morning, and in Spanish, of course, saying okay, so they did say this and this, correct? And I was more asleep than awake, actually. And I'm like, yes, Mom, they did. Okay, and what did they say about this? About a certain topic? I'm like, yes, Mom, they said this and this. Oh, okay. So, okay, I'm gonna go to sleep now. I'm like, okay, go to sleep. So, yeah, that's a regular thing, though.
Okay. And how has the trial affected you?
I think of what I know, but I think my husband can maybe answer that question as well. It's affected me in so many ways that I don't even know.
I can see that you're trying to hold back your emotions.
Objection to counsel testifying and non-responsive.
Sustained clearly.
Are you holding back your emotions right now, ma'am?
I'm trying to, but just to keep it together, I'm sorry.
So you're still trying to remain strong even today, is that correct?
I have to be, yes, ma'am.
So, ma'am, at the end of the day, what would you, is there something that you would want the court to consider in sentencing Raul Lopez?
Objection, Your Honor. If she's requesting an opinion of this witness as to what a just sentence is, then we object on relevance and it invades the sentencer's province.
You're not asking for that, are you?
No.
I only ask that the witness is aware that she's not asking that.
So,
Ma'am, I'm not asking you to tell the judge that you want a certain number for this defendant, but what exactly do you want?
From this trial, you mean?
From this trial and everything that you've gone through. If you were to have something to say to the judge, you can tell him right now.
What did you tell you? And I say this.
Objection, relevance, invades the province, the sentencer, and we would also object as improper victim impact testimony.
well, I want to read it, so rule for now.
Well, but that, with all due respect, Judge, by the time you hear it, it's part of the record, so that's my concern.
It's going to be impact.
No, Your Honor, the impact statement, I explained to her that the impact statement that comes after. This is just her testimony as to how this defendant impacted her
You may
life.
answer. You may answer.
I say this from the bottom of my heart, from the family, from everyone affected, that I want, we all want, I think the community would want the maximum sentence for
There it
this
is,
man.
Judge, objection. That's exactly what I asked this court to admonish counsel of.
Listen, what happened here?
We move to strike.
It's denied, but I can't handle it.
Your Honor, I didn't ask her to say a number, so she didn't say a number.
I did not say a number,
I
Judge.
think,
The maximum.
why take it, I take it to be my fault, Your Honor. I didn't mean for her to say that. At the end of the day, you are the sentencer, you are the one that's going to do the sentencing, and by no way or means are we trying to say that you need to do something, because you as a judge
I understand that.
know what sentencing this defendant is.
I'll stand the objection.
We move to strike the last question and answer.
So rule.
I pass the witness, Your Honor.
No questions.
I'm sorry.
No questions.
You step down, Ms. Lopez. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
State your full name for the record.
Rafael Martinez Ramirez.
Rafael Martinez Ramirez.
And Mr. Martinez, is it correct that you were one of the victims on November the 28th of 2016?
Sí.
Yes.
Can you let the judge know specifically what your injuries were on November the 28th of 2016?
Bueno,
Oh, Your Honor, that's been asked and answered at trial. The court heard the evidence. Counsel's already offered that evidence. Cumulative.
Can you go ahead and let us know how you were injured on November the 28th of 2016?
bueno, yo recibí 6 balazos,
Well, I received 6 shots,
4 en el estómago y 2 en el brazo.
4 in the stomach and 2 in the arm.
And I believe it was your testimony that when you got shot, you ran out of the break room. Is that correct?
Sí.
Yes.
And why did you run out of the break room?
Pues me asusté.
I was scared.
Did you feel pain?
Sí, en mi brazo.
Yes, in my arm.
And do you remember what happened? Did somebody help you there at the HEB?
Bueno, yo recuerdo que me fui caminando y por más que me agarraban mi brazo, salía mucha sangre de mi brazo.
Well, I remember that I left walking, and even when I was grabbing my arm, there was a lot of blood coming out of my arm.
Entonces me fui caminando a pedir auxilio.
So then I went walking to ask for help.
And who helped you?
Me acuerdo que llegué al área por donde estaba el jamón y ahí me hinqué y no recuerdo quién llegó, nomás sé que de rato llegó Denise y me estuvo auxiliando.
Well, I went to the area where the ham is at, and there I kneeled down, and I do not remember who arrived. Later, I remember that Denise arrived, and she was helping me.
Okay. And what did Denise do for you? Do you remember?
Bueno, yo recuerdo más mi brazo porque era donde salía mucha sangre. Por más que yo me agarraba, salía un chorro de sangre.
I remember my arm the best because even when I was grabbing it, there was a lot of blood coming out.
Recuerdo que me quitaron la playera, me la rompieron, me la quitaron y sé que ella me amarró en el brazo, me hizo un torniquete.
I remember that they took my t-shirt off, they tore it apart, and she did a tourniquet.
Okay. Did you fear for your life at that point?
Sí.
Yes.
How were you feeling physically?
Bueno, cuando me tenían ahí, de ratito empecé a sentir mucho frío.
Well, when they had me there, I started feeling cold.
Sí, empecé a temblar y les decía que tenía mucho frío, me empezaron a tapar con chamarra.
I started shivering, and I was telling them that I was really cold, and they started covering me up with jackets.
Do you remember how much time you were there waiting for the ambulance to show up?
No recuerdo.
I do not remember.
Did the ambulance, did EMS show up and take you to the hospital?
Sí.
Yes. And do you remember what happened to you once you got to the hospital?
Bueno, cuando llegué al hospital, me rompieron todas mis ropas y ya, me empezaron a auxiliar.
Well, when I arrived to the hospital, they tore up all of my clothes, and they started helping me.
Me dolía mi brazo, era lo que más sentía el dolor porque traía muy ensangrentado mi brazo.
My arm was hurting. I was in pain. That was what hurt the most because there was a lot of blood.
Did you realize that you had been shot in the stomach?
Nada, nomás el de enfrente del estómago.
Only the one in the front, in the stomach.
Pero en realidad traía dos a un costado uno en el otro costado y el del centro del estómago.
But the reality was that I had one on one side, another one on the other side, and the one in the center.
Did you have to have surgery, sir?
Sí.
Yes.
Can you tell us what kind of surgeries you had, like on your arm?
Bueno, la que recuerdo que me hicieron primero cuando iba al hospital fue que me dijeron que me sacaron, me abrieron la parte de mi estómago para salvarme la vida.
Well, the one that I remember the most, it was when I first arrived to the hospital. They told me that they did surgery. They opened up my stomach. They told me that it was to save my life.
Supe que me sacaron partes de mis órganos para ver dónde estaban alojadas las balas.
I learned that they took part of my organs to see where the bullet had lodged.
And what happened once you had the stomach surgery? Did you have any other surgery?
Bueno, cuando desperté fue lo peor, porque cuando desperté yo estaba entubado y era una desesperación bien grande, la verdad.
Well, when I woke up, it was the worst, because when I woke up, I was intubated and I was desperate.
Recuerdo que lloraba yo ahí y les decía que me dieran algo para escribir porque yo sentía el aire me faltaba.
I remember that I was crying there, and I remember asking them to give me something to write because I was feeling that short of breath.
Entonces les escribí y ellos me decían que estaba bien, pero yo sentía una desesperación bien grande en la falta de aire.
So I wrote to them and they told me that it was okay, but I felt desperate because of the lack of air.
And how long did they have you intubated?
Yo creo que ese mismo día pasaron las horas y me lo quitaron, pero cuando me lo quitaron fue un dolor inmenso porque me lo quitaron despierto.
I think that same day, some hours went by and they took it off, but when they did, the pain was great.
Did you have surgery to your arm?
Después de que me operaron el estómago, como a los 3 días aproximadamente, fue cuando me hicieron la cirugía del brazo para repararme el hueso que tenía quebrado.
After they did the surgery in the stomach, 3 days after that approximately, that's when they did surgery in my arm to repair the broken bone.
And what did they do to repair your bone?
Bueno, me pusieron una placa de metal en el hueso con tornillos, pero cuando desperté de ahí,
Well, they put a metal plaque in the bone with screws. But when I woke up,
cuando desperté de ahí vino más fuerte el sufrimiento porque me tenían que poner morfina para poderme calmar el dolor.
but more suffering came after that. They had to give me morphine to calm the pain.
Was that to calm you, the pain in your arm?
Para calmar el dolor. Sí, yo me la ponían y yo me dormía y cuando me despertaban yo quería que me estuvieran poniendo más para dormir porque
They
era un
would
dolor
give it to
inmenso.
me and I would go to sleep, yes, for the pain in my arm. When they would give it to me, I would go to sleep, and when I woke up, the pain was there. I wanted for them to keep giving it to me.
And how long were you in the hospital?
Aproximadamente 9 días.
Approximately 9 days.
When you got released from the hospital, did you go home?
Sí.
Yes.
And, sir, what's your wife's name?
¿Lo tengo que decir?
Do I have to say it?
No, you don't have to say, but you're married?
Sí.
Yes.
Okay. And, did she take care of you?
Sí.
Yes.
Sir, after this incident happened, how long did it take you to fully recover from your injuries?
Pues estuve yendo a terapias, no sé exactamente cuánto tiempo.
I kept going to therapies. I do not know exactly how long.
Are you talking about physical therapy or what kind of therapy?
Terapia física.
Physical therapy.
Okay. And did you go to get any type of psychological therapy?
Sí.
Yes.
And why did you go to the psychological therapy?
Tenía pesadillas.
I had nightmares.
And how long did you go to talk to a psychologist?
No recuerdo aproximadamente cuánto tiempo fui, pero sí estuve yendo varias citas.
I do not remember approximately how long, but I kept going to several appointments.
And sir, before this incident, how long had you been working at HEB?
No recuerdo.
I do not remember.
Okay. Did you, after this incident, did you go back to work with HEB?
No.
No.
How long were you without working?
Un año y varios meses.
1 year and several months.
Sir, today, do you still suffer pain, physical pain from this incident?
Sí, de hecho ahorita yo creo como cambió el clima me duele más, se me intensifica más el dolor del brazo.
Yes, actually right now, maybe due to the change of weather, the pain in my arm is more intense.
Do you have the pain in your arm every day?
Sí, de hecho yo le dije al doctor y dijo que no podía hacer nada, que el dolor iba a quedar de por vida.
Yes, actually I told the doctor and he said there was nothing he could do, that the pain was going to be for life.
Okay. And I believe, did you have to have a second operation in your abdomen?
Me hicieron una segunda operación en mi brazo y en mi abdomen.
I had a second surgery in my abdomen and my arm.
And why did you have the second surgery on your arm?
En mi brazo para retirarme el metal que traía.
In my arm to retrieve the metal that I had in there.
And in the abdomen?
Y el del abdomen porque sentía un dolor en medio y me sacaron un pedazo de hueso, no sé qué era.
In the abdomen because I felt some pain in the middle and they got out a piece of bone. I do not know what it was.
Okay. Sir, you know that we're here today for the sentencing of Raul Lopez, is that correct?
Sí,
Yes,
And Raul Lopez was a co-worker of yours, right?
sí.
yes.
Had you ever threatened him in any way or manner?
No.
No.
So you know that the judge is going to do the sentencing in this case, is that correct?
Sí.
Yes.
Without mentioning a number, is there anything that you want to tell the judge in reference to what you want to happen? Or
Before the,
I'll withdraw the question. Is there anything that you want to say for the court to take into consideration in the sentencing of Raul Lopez?
Yo creo en la justicia y quiero que se haga justicia.
I believe in justice and I want for justice to be made.
Thank you, I'll pass this.
no questions.
Can you tell the court what your injuries were on November the 28th of 2016?
The injuries I suffered that night of the shooting was I got struck in the upper left chest area. The bullet went straight out, but I do have permanent nerve damage on my left arm, so I really can't. I have like weakness on my left hand. It's not the same anymore. It's like developed what they call claw hand because I got damage on I can't remember what nerve it was, but it struck a main nerve. I got struck on the right side of my knee. Really can't bend down like I used to, or at least run. Lost that like mobility. So it's like I'm uneven, like can't run like I used to, or can't really pick up anything heavy because I have so much more strength in my right hand than my left hand. So I'm like always like off balance.
Okay. Did you also get shot in the left thigh?
In the left eye, no.
No.
Just the upper left chest.
Okay, and your knee?
Yes, the right side of my knee.
Okay. And going back to November the 28th of 2016, when you got shot, how were you feeling at that point?
Before I got shot or after I got shot?
Right after you got shot.
I remember when after I got shot, I was just like adrenaline going, so I didn't know what was going on, what had happened, who had shot. Like I didn't know. I just remember laying on the ground, left arm I couldn't move it because it was just like numb. Like I couldn't move it at all. I had no strength. Right side of my knee was in pain. Like it was pain here and then pain on my right knee, excuse me. And just like it happened so quick, I was like in shock, like I didn't know what was going on.
Were you able to get up and walk?
No, I couldn't.
Were you asking for help?
I was screaming and I don't remember if I called for help. I might have, and I just remember other associates coming to assist me, like what was going on, because everybody was clueless what had happened, like didn't know what was going on that night. I mean,
Is it correct to state that you were just sitting down, going to get ready to have your lunch break?
correct. Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember you were trying to call anyone?
Was I trying to call somebody? Yes, my wife. When I was laying on the ground, I was, but I couldn't access my phone because I had a passcode and I had so much blood that I couldn't unlock it.
Okay. Do you remember anybody trying to come and help you while you were there?
I do remember Denise and Peter. I don't remember their last name, but they were also like what had happened, like what was going on. But I do remember them trying to assist me, and when they were assisting me, it was like so quick when the police arrived, when the ambulance arrived, and everything.
Okay. What hospital did they take you to?
Rio Grande Central, I think.
And what happened once you got there to the hospital?
I just remember like it was the quickest ride to the hospital, like ever behind the ambulance. I just remember getting to the hospital, going through the doors, and seeing the big white light that they shine, and it was like I was out. Like it happened so quick. Like I mean.
Do you remember what surgeries you had?
They just did. I think I had a hairline fracture on my right knee, so they think it's called like an IND, where they just go in and clean it out. I remember getting stitches on. I think it was on my upper left thigh because it ricocheted, so it did strike my left upper thigh. So I got stitches there. I had a chest tube here with also like stitches on my left side.
Why did you have the chest tube?
Because it punctured my lungs, so I couldn't breathe.
And did they do anything with your arm?
No, they just, I guess, saw the damages of it. I did go to Dr. Hussein, who is a nurse specialist, but he said he didn't want to do any more surgery because he was afraid he was going to damage me more. So just physical therapy, that's what I was doing through like the whole process.
Do you remember how long you were at the hospital?
I think it was there for like 2 weeks.
Were you ever in the ICU?
Yes, I was. I think I was there maybe 2 days, 2-3 days.
Is that when you had the chest tube?
Yes, and when I was ICU, I was intubated, or from the chest tube through the mouth and everything.
Do you remember how long you were intubated?
I think may have been 2 or 3 days. I think so.
Did you suffer from a lot of pain from the intubation or anything like that?
Pain, like when they pull it out, yeah. It's like you have like a really bad sore throat. You can't really speak when they pull that tube out of your mouth.
Okay. You said you received physical therapy. Was that what, for your arm?
For my arm and my leg, because I remember I was in a wheelchair for about 3-4 months, so I couldn't put any pressure, any weight on my right leg. So I was like kind of like learning how to walk again, because all my strength was on my left leg, so my right side would just like collapse.
And what about for your left arm?
My left arm was same thing, physical therapy, strengthening exercises, trying to grip a water bottle.
And what did the doctor tell you in reference to your hand? You said it was, they called it
When Dr. Hussein evaluated me and was going to therapy, he said that if you're lucky, it might be, I'd probably say 60-70% chance. He's like 100% you'll never be 100% again with your left arm. He's like, because you have significant permanent damage on it.
How long, did you go back to work with HEB after the incident?
No,
How long were you without a job?
a couple years actually.
Are you back to working today?
Yes, ma'am, I'm working.
Do you still suffer any pain from those injuries to this day?
I do suffer, like I mentioned, since my left hand is weaker, it's more sensitive. So if I'm down stacking a box, whatever, and I hit it, it's like more painful. It's like more tingly sensation. Right knee, same thing. It's like sensitive. It's kind of weird how it is, but coldness also affects it. Like I start feeling like just pain, so I have to like keep it warm and everything.
So without telling us, you know that you're here today because of, this is the sentencing phase in the Raul Lopez case, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And without telling us or telling the court what amount of years and then let's not get into that, but what exactly do you want to happen today in reference to this case? You tell the judge.
What I want to happen is I want justice to be served, to pay for what he did, not only to me and my other associates, but to Mario Pulido. Time-wise, I mean...
Objection, Your Honor.
No, you can't say
Oh,
that.
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, apologize.
Just stay.
Just to justice to be served.
Objection, it's not responsive.
Overruled.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it.
Mr. Flores?
No question.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, sir.
May I proceed? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lozano. Could you state your full name for the record, please?
Denise Lozano.
Denise, how are you employed at this moment?
How am I employed? By HEB.
Okay. And I'm going to take you back specifically to November the 28th of 2016. Were you employed with HEB at that time?
Yes, I was.
And what exactly were you employed as?
My department was called Shelf Edge at the moment.
Shelf edge?
Yes.
And what were your duties at that point?
At the time, I was in charge of changing tags, price tags, coupons. Mainly we had work every day, but that was mainly on Wednesdays.
Okay. And were you working the night shift on that date specifically?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Lozano, was there anything else that was happening in your life? Were you going to school or anything like that?
I was going to school for EMS.
And where were you going to school for that?
STC.
And how long had you been attending STC for EMS school?
I had just started at the time, yeah.
Had you learned any specific basic things about people that were in trauma or anything like that?
Yeah, just basic first aid, tourniquets, stuff like that. Just bleeding.
On that specific night, Ms. Lozano, Were you there when the shooting happened?
Yes, I was.
Okay. You were not in the break room though, is that correct?
No, I was not. I was out in the aisle.
Okay. Had you already taken your lunch, or were you taking your lunch at that point?
We had not taken our lunch yet. We were about to go in to take our lunch.
Okay. And when you take your lunch, where do you usually go to?
To the break room where the shooting happened.
Okay. So at that point, you all still hadn't taken your lunch break?
No.
Okay. Now, once you understood that a shooting had, well, what happened what happened that night that brought your attention, that got your attention?
Rafa screaming.
And by Rafa, do you mean Rafael Martinez?
Yes.
And what did you do in reference to Mr. Martinez?
He was just screaming for help, and when I saw him, he just said that there was a shooting happening, and I didn't believe him. I did not picture a shooting at my workplace. The only reason why I believed him was because I started seeing blood coming out of his arm. That's when I was like, okay, he is not playing, he is not joking. There is something going on. That's when I ran up to him.
Okay. And did you try to help him at that point?
Yeah, I just wanted to get us out of the store.
Okay.
I really didn't do much until he collapsed.
Okay. So what did you do once he collapsed there at the
I was running a little bit ahead of him because he was right behind me. When I turned back and I saw him collapse, I ran back to him. That's when I put a cardboard in the back so he wouldn't, because he was cold, he would say. I took off my jacket, wrapped it around his arm because that's where he was bleeding. I would see more blood coming out of his stomach area, and that's when I just cut the shirt. And that's when we started applying, my coworker and I, gauzes on him, which were filling up blood pretty fast.
Okay. And did you do anything with his arm specifically?
I did. I wrote my jacket. I put it around his arm.
Did you put a tourniquet?
Like a tourniquet, yeah.
Once you attended to him, did you check anything else out?
I just wanted to see where he was bleeding. I did see like right around his stomach, like here, and then like somewhere in the middle. I couldn't really see. I did see holes, but I couldn't see much of them because they were full of blood. And then, well, his arm, that's the one that was protruding more blood out.
Did you go help anybody else over in the break room?
Yes, I ran, by the time I was already on the line with 911, and they were asking how many people were injured, and that's when I ran to the break room because Rafa was telling me that there was more people in there.
Okay. And who did you see in the break room?
I saw Billy, the one, which was the one that was hurt. I saw Mario, obviously, on the floor, and then I saw like 2 other coworkers that were able to run out.
Okay. So, Mario, are you talking about Mario
Pulido.
Did you go check on him?
I did go check on him, and he did not have a pulse.
Okay. And did you check with Billy Joe?
I did go with Billy. He was facing up. I do remember he was choking on his own blood. I did stick my fingers in his mouth so he wouldn't be choking, and I turned him to the side. My goal was to remove him from the break room, but I could not do that.
He couldn't stand up?
He could not stand up, and I couldn't drag him out. Very tiny.
Okay. So, ma'am, what was your purpose that night?
Just to save them.
Ma'am, how has this incident that happened that night on November the 28th of 2016, how has that affected your life?
It has impacted me very much, I feel like. First of all, I could not continue with my EMS. It was just many things that would trigger my mind. And till this day, I get triggered by sounds, by people crowds. I just cannot go out and not, or I cannot give my back to the door. I need to know my exits. I get in the restaurant and I already have a game plan on if something does happen. Where am I gonna run? Where am I gonna hide? And
So do you did you feel this way before the incident?
no, I feel like I was very naive. Like, who could do such a thing, especially to coworkers?
After this incident happened, did you get any type of psychological counseling?
No. I started recently, like about a month ago, that I started going to counseling, but because I could not bear it, I couldn't keep with it anymore.
Do you feel that your anxiety is getting worse?
Yes. Anxiety, depression, PTSD.
Ma'am, you knew that the sentencing was going to be today on April the 26th, is that correct?
I thought it was tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you reached out to
The lawyer.
and she told you it was today. And you wanted to be here for the sentencing, is that correct?
That is correct.
And without saying what the sentence should be in this case, is there anything that you want to say to the court to consider in this case?
Just justice, not only for the family, but for the rest of us that were there. He did not only impact the family, but he impacted everyone that was in there,
Okay.
including his own family.
Right, and still to this day, do you work at that same
I
property
do.
of HEB?
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of work are you doing there now with the HEB?
I work for the pharmacy.
And do you work night shifts?
No, I could not do night shifts anymore.
No further questions, Your Honor, I'll pass it.
Mr. Flores?
No questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lozano.
Also, Defense Counsel, Your Honor, we're hearing this case, of course, for the sentencing. I think it's important to note that we had, this was not an aggravated robbery or home invasion or whatever Defense Counsel wants to call it. This was a mass shooting that happened at the HEB on November the 28th of 2016. And because of the actions of this defendant, Raul Lopez, so many families were affected. Not only the families, but the community. We have the person who died on that night, Mario Pulido, who we heard through his family, his wife and his daughter, and not only them, but also as to coworkers, that he was a fine man, that he was a fine worker, he was a provider for his family, sole provider for his family. As a matter of fact, we also heard it from Raul Lopez when Dr. Michael Arambula asked him, how do you feel about Mario Pulido? And he said that Mario Pulido was a good worker and a good friend, who did not deserve to die, being shot 9 times. We also have his co-worker, Joe Martinez, who suffered from this incident. He got shot several times. You heard him that he suffers from pain in his arm, his hand. He has limited motion in his hand. He still suffers from pain to his knee. That he thought he was going to die. One of those bullets perforated his lung. He had to be intubated, and he was in ICU. We also heard, Your Honor, from Rafael Martinez, one of the other victims in this case. We heard that he had been shot 6 times, possibly 3 times in the abdomen and twice in the chest, upper arm area. We heard that today he still has pain. He suffers from anxiety. has pain to his arm and will always have that pain for the rest of his life. Most importantly, Your Honor, we heard from Denise Lozano, who was an employee there at HEB and was able to save the lives of Billy Joe Martinez and Rafael Martinez. We heard how she was brave enough to go over there and help Rafael Martinez put a tourniquet on his arm, put gauze in his stomach to stop the bleeding. Not only did she help him, but then she went over to Billy Joe Martinez, who she said was choking on his blood. And she was able to turn him on his side, take whatever he was choking out of his mouth, and give him first aid. But the most important thing that we heard from her, Your Honor, is even though she was not actually, didn't have an injury, and she was not in the break room, her injury, Your Honor, is still that she's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. She suffers from anxiety. Because of this incident, she decided to change her career path and not go to EMS school. I think that she's one of the most important witnesses that we have here, because she was the one that saved lives, but at the end of the day, it totally changed her life. And so I think that defense counsel wants to mitigate the shooting, this mass shooting. He wants to mitigate the shooting by saying that the defendant has a mental illness. Yes, Your Honor, he might have a mental illness, but not all mentally ill people go and commit mass shootings. And I think that that does not mitigate the situation. He knew exactly what he did. It was premeditated. He called 911 and said, I was the shooter at the HEB. I did it. Come pick me up. He had the wherewithal to get rid of the gun because he didn't want the cops, and he told the 911 dispatcher, I don't have the gun, so don't shoot. He knew exactly what he was doing. It was premeditated. In his statement, he said that he was tired. He knew he was going to get fired from HEB. He was on the verge of being... Your Honor, the state does not have to prove a motive. I don't have to have a motive. The only thing I have to prove is that he committed this mass shooting. And he was one person away from dying for it to be a capital murder. Your Honor, for justice for this family, for justice for the victims that were there, for justice for the whole community, Your Honor, I think that there's nothing less that you can give this defendant, but what he deserves is life in prison. He deserves to be in prison for life. He sits here not remorseful, not even for 1 second. In the other counts, Your Honor, in count 1, for murder, life. In count 2, for attempted murder of Rafael Garza, the maximum is 20 years. 20. Count 3, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. And Rafael Garza, 20 is the most. Count number 4, attempted murder. On Billy Joe Martinez, Your Honor, 20 years, the maximum on that count. Count number 5, aggravated assault on Billy Joe Martinez, maximum 20 years. Count number 6, attempted murder on Rafael Martinez, the maximum 20 years. Count number 7, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon on Rafael Martinez, 20 years. And finally, Your Honor, as to count number 8, as to attempted capital murder for the mass shooting, The maximum on that is life, and that is what the state is requesting, Your Honor. Justice is not justice till justice is served, and you put an impact on what the word justice means for the family, for the community, for everybody in Hidalgo County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hinojosa. Mr. Butler, do you want to?
Familiar with this court, known this court for many years. In my comments today, there's no indication that the court has forgotten what our system of justice stands for. And on the heels of that comment, I recognize that there is a punishment that is required in this case. But what is punishment? There are 4 different ways that punishment can be defined: deterrence, incapacitation, vengeance or retribution. And unfortunately, what the state is asking this court to do is to use the word justice and apply a vengeful sentence against Raul Lopez. Before the trial even started, when we began our voir dire proceedings, this court, in its own voir dire, talked to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about the presumption of innocence. Immediately upon opening my case, I told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that Mr. Lopez had in fact committed this crime. The 911 call that we heard over the course of the trial, we hear Mr. Lopez inquiring of the status of his friends. We hear him ask, was someone shot? We hear him ask, are they okay? Is he remorseful here today? I would challenge Ms. Hinojosa to explain to the court how she can look at Mr. Lopez here today and say whether he's remorseful or not. I expect the court heard all of Ms. Hinojosa's closing argument, and unfortunately all we hear from Ms. Hinojosa is a demand for retribution in this case. When Ms. Pulido began her testimony, she began by telling this court that she wanted the maximum punishment allowable, over objection, after being admonished not to say those things. But later in her examination, she told this court that she wanted what was fair. Is fairness now an eye for an eye? Are we to believe that if you commit a crime, our American judicial system requires you to be punished in the same way and dismissive of any and all circumstances as they relate to the accused? Ms. Hinojosa would stand up here and have this court dismiss the testimony of the professionals in this case. She would have the court dismiss the doctor's notes from Hidalgo County Jail. She would have this court dismiss the testimony from Dr. Gregorio Pina. She would have this court dismiss the testimony from Dr. Tomas Gonzalez, all of whom testified that they were appointed by this court. This court appointed those professionals in order to assist and give this court an understanding of the existence of mitigating circumstances. So it's not something that the defense is asking the court to do. Those witnesses came forward, a record was made of their testimony and in their opinion. And if the court will remember, we're talking close to 85 years worth of psychiatric and psychological opinion told this court that he not only continues to suffer it today, he suffered it on November the 28th of 2016. All of the evidence that came through at the time of trial has been offered at this point. We're asking the court to consider that. Is it mitigating? Yes, it's mitigating. And so before the court settles on a time, or before the court settles on what is just, I implore the court to take that testimony into consideration. I find it ironical. The irony is so thick that Ms. Hinojosa would have this court consider the testimony from the family members who have come in here today to tell you that they have been psychologically traumatized by the events in this case. I expect they have. But why is Ms. Hinojosa asking you to consider the psychological impact of the family and asking this court to dismiss 87 years worth of testimony from these doctors? Mr. Lopez committed a crime. And on the night of the 911 call, had he really understood the gravity of what he had done, why didn't he go to Mexico? If he was intending to flee or escape prosecution, why didn't he? Like the testimony we heard from Ms. Pulido today, it can't be explained. And while I agree the state is not required to prove motive, I think it should be noted that there hasn't been any explanation for what happened that night. other than the 85 years worth of testimony from our experts, who told this court he was having hallucinations, he was paranoid schizophrenic, he was being followed by the government agents that were crawling through his TV, he was hearing voices, he was seeing things. He refused to communicate with anyone other than in writing, only then to burn the tablet that he was using to communicate. All of those indications are consistent with what these doctors told this court. Does that mean that he should be excused? No. And I told the jury on opening statement, I'm not here to provide you an excuse. I'm trying to give an explanation. So all of the testimony from the co-workers here, no explanation. By all accounts, they were good friends. They'd known each other. They even met each other's family. And here today, we heard from some of them. We didn't hear anything different from them today. No explanation. We heard testimony from family members. No explanation. We heard testimony from experts. No explanation. But I believe there is, and that explanation is contained within the doctor's testimony. Unfortunately, Mr. Lopez will have to do some prison time. But for Ms. Hinojosa to come up here and ask this court without blinking an eye to impose the maximum available to this court and dismiss the mitigating circumstances that have been provided is criminal. Almost as criminal as her asking questions of the witnesses that she knew she wasn't supposed to. This isn't about justice for the state of Texas. This is about winning. So, if the court is going to consider what is justice for the victim's family, the court should consider what is justice for the defendant's family. And thankfully, Ms. Lozano, here today, as a matter of fact, reminded this court of the impact not only on the victim, but on Mr. Lopez's family. The testimony during trial heard that this family has indeed suffered over years, not only with mental illness, but by the loss of two of Mr. Lopez's brothers to cartel violence, which in and of itself, a trauma, contributed to the schizophrenic condition that he now suffers from. So, are we to believe that if someone has this illness, behaves or acts in a certain way, are we to suggest to our American judicial system and our community that it should be dismissed, disregarded, disbelieved? Because if that's the case, judges, then this is all academic. If you commit a murder, you do life in prison. So what I'm asking the court to do is to consider the evidence, give it the weight that it deserves, and give the Pulido family the justice they require, which according to Ms. Pulido, what is fair. But let's not forget about Mr. Lopez. Let's not forget about the trauma and the tragedy in his life that brought him to the point where, yes, he could no longer stand it. What could he no longer stand? The war in his mind. And the war in his mind, unfortunately, led to this tragic event. My hope is that there won't be another tragedy when this court sentences Mr. Lopez. Am I asking the court for the minimum? No, sir. I don't believe the minimum is fair. I don't believe the minimum is justice. I do believe that if the court would consider a range of punishment between 20 and 30 years, that justice can be served, an example can be set, mitigating circumstances will have been considered, and Mr. Lopez can not only get the incapacitation and the deterrence that he requires, but on some level, the treatment that he requires. The treatment that the experts told this court he required. Thank you.
Say the last word.
Your Honor, I just want to tell the court, yes, I do agree with defense counsel. This case is not about winning or losing. We've all lost in this case. And the state is never about winning. I'm about justice. And yeah, he wants you to think about, hey, let's look at Raul Lopez. And he's asking that you take his mental illness into consideration. And I'm telling you, Your Honor, if you listen to all the experts that testified, all of them said that he has a problem with malingering. Malingering means lying, making up things. And I I remind the court that before this incident happened, all the records of mental illness, there's no records of mental illness with this defendant. Not once had it been diagnosed. Maybe in Mexico, but we don't have proof of that. We just have to believe what the family says. But at the end of the day, what do we have? The only thing that we have is what happened on that night, November the 28th of 2016, how he acted, how he reacted, what he did, how premeditated everything, how in his statement he said, I sat there and thought maybe I should just go and shoot the gun in the air. Maybe I should go inside and no, but that wasn't enough. And he did it in a cowardly way. He stood outside the window and shot. And not only did he take the gun with one magazine, he took 2 magazines and he unloaded 1.5 magazines. So that was premeditated, 2 magazines. And then on top of that, defense counsel wants you to find it mitigating. There's nothing mitigating about this case. And the only thing that he did, he caused to himself and to his family. I want the court to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Does the court before I pronounce sentence?
I did not hear very well.
You have a right to address me and say anything you want to before I pronounce the sentence.
Your Honor, before he responds, if I may, while I recognize his right to allocute at this time, we have asked him to remain silent. And although we understand it's his decision, we just ask the record to reflect that we are once again counseling him not to make any comments.
What is it, Mr. Lopez, is it your decision not to make any statements at this time?
Sí.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lopez, let me address a few things to you, for you. You can really see it. I have a daughter, she's a clinical psychologist, and through her I have learned a lot about mental health and mental illness. And I have learned from her that it is okay not to be okay. I've also learned from her that we all need to work very hard on not making mental illness or health a stigma. It happens to a lot of people. But I also learned from her that to treat mental health and mental illness, we have to do it early, and we have to do it often. And I'm saying this because I wish we could turn the clock back and your mom would get treatment early and often. And your dad would get treatment, would have gotten treatment early and often. But we can't do that. And I wish we could turn the clock back and you would have gotten treatment early and often for your very serious mental illness. But we can't do that either. And I realize all the evidence in this case regarding mental health and mental illness that you and your family have, and that impacts me a lot. It really does. But I'm also mindful of this. Dr. Gonzalez, Tomas Gonzalez, psychiatrist, he informed all of us that schizophrenia is a lifelong illness. It's going to be with you for the rest of your life. I'm also very impacted by Dr. Pina's testimony. He says that for the rest of your life, you're going to be in danger of causing serious bodily injury to other people for the rest of your life. And that to me is very impactful, and it haunts me every single day for the last month or so. And my concern is, according to what he said, and what I have learned in this trial, they could cause serious bodily injury to anybody at any time. And that's frightening. Okay. So as to count one, on the murder of Mario Pulido, I'm going to sentence you to a life term in this case, life sentence. Count two, the attempted murder of Raul Garza, sentence of 10 years. Count three, aggravated assault of Raul Garza, 10-year sentence. Count four, the attempted murder of Joe Martinez, 15 years. Count five, the aggravated assault of Joe Martinez, also 15 years. Count six, the attempted murder of Rafael Martinez, 20 years. Count seven, the aggravated assault of Rafael Martinez, 20 years. Count eight, attempted capital murder, a life sentence. And it pains me to pronounce these sentences, but I think it's the right thing to do under all these circumstances. Mr. Lopez, you have a right to appeal to this decision, and I suspect you will. I will appoint lawyers for you if you want me to, at no cost to you. I'll also order a transcript of all the proceedings in this case, also at no cost to you. Just keep in mind that there are deadlines to file motions for retrial and also to file appeals. Ms. Hinojosa, did the families want to provide impact statements?
Yes, they do, Your Honor. They want to provide impact statements.
And these are off the records.
In speaking with Ms. Lozano, and in her testimony here today, she did say that she's getting treatment for the...
Objection to counsel's testifying.
I'm not testifying, Your Honor. It was part of her testimony.
And the court's already heard it.
Yeah. I understand that, but she's not a victim.
Right, but, Your Honor, I just, for whatever it's worth, I just want to say this. I think that a psychological mental
Objection,
illness...
Your Honor, for whatever it's worth, is not a response to the legal objection. If counsel is trying to ask this court to consider something the counsel is not able to administer.
Your Honor made a statement, a very important statement as to mental illness and psychological impact that situations like this take on people, not only the victims, but however the people that were in the area when it happened. And in speaking to Denise Lozano, it is my understanding that she is suffering psychologically from this incident, and she is going to counseling, and I think it's part of her mental illness, wellness, to help her get over this. I think there's some things that she needs to get out of her chest in reference to this case, and at the end of the day, I know it is your decision, and I will leave it in your hands.
I'm not stating the objection on as much as I don't want to, but I'm going to have to. I don't want to take any motions for this case.
This statement comes from my family and I. Este impacto viene de parte de familia, de toda la familia Pulido. Más que nada, Raúl, no sé que no me has conocido, desafortunadamente nomás por esa circunstancia. Yo soy la hija grande de Mario y tuve el privilegio de ser su hija por 25 años. Es la edad que tuve cuando me lo quitaste de esta vida. Pienso en mí y pienso en todo el coraje, el dolor, el sufrimiento, el trauma que nos has dado, pero más que nada me duele más porque no fui la única que fue afectada. Mario tuvo 4 hijos y yo, gracias a Dios, tuve 25 años, pero mi hermana, la más chica, tuvo nomás 11. Mi otro hermano tuvo 13 y el que le seguía tenía 20. Yo tuve 25 años, ¿verdad?, de maravillosos momentos, pero no nomás a mí, pero a mis hermanos, a mi mamá. Nos quitaste completamente, nos cambiaste completamente la vida, y ojalá que hasta el día que tú estés aquí en este mundo te des cuenta. Yo pido la máxima sentencia, ¿verdad? Y aprobamos a lo que pasó el día de hoy. Creo en respeto, en mental health, I do, ¿verdad? Como otras ¿verdad?, personas lo miramos todos los días, ¿verdad? Pero en mi corazón yo sé que lo que tú hiciste no fue por tu disabilidad que dice que teniste. Parte de nuestro corazón ya no está presente. Mi papá vivía 5 minutos del HIV, tanto año que mi papá trabajó y de un día al otro nunca regresó, ¿verdad? Y eso es algo que nomás nosotros, entre nosotros y con fe tenemos que agarrar la fortaleza. Me pongo a pensar, no nomás el trauma que nos causaste a nosotros, pero sino que también el trauma a la gente que estuvo afectada, a la comunidad de donde vivías y a tu familia. Ojalá que encuentres paz en ti y que puedas vivir cada día para saber lo que hiciste. Parte de eso, aunque sea, es que estoy gracias y orgullosa de decir que soy hija de Mario Pulido y que tuve un extraordinario padre, ¿verdad? Y del día de hoy, ¿verdad? Este duro caso podemos cerrar, nos pueden ayudar a cerrar las heridas que tenemos y que vamos a seguir teniendo. Muchas gracias.